The click of champagne glasses mingled with soft jazz at the Queen's Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. Against the backdrop of Manhattan's glittering skyline, Jaden Okoro adjusted his bow tie, scanning the crowd of New York's elite. That's when he saw her. Amara Diallo commanded attention without asking for it. Her silver gown caught the light as she addressed a group of donors, her warm laugh drawing others into her orbit. At 32, she'd built her own empire. 2 million social media followers hung on her every word about success, authenticity, and chasing dreams. "She's magnetic," whispered Marcus, Jaden's college friend and fellow surgeon. "You should introduce yourself." But someone else watched from the shadows of a marble column. Ebele Okoro's fingers tightened around her clutch as she observed her son's obvious attraction to the young woman. For 29 years, she'd guided every step of Jaden's path, from his first words to his choice of medical school. Now this stranger threatened to disrupt everything. "Dr. Okoro," Amara's voice carried across the ballroom as Jaden approached. "Your work with pediatric trauma patients is remarkable. I'd love to feature it on my platform." Ebele moved closer, pretending to examine a charity auction display. She caught fragments of their conversation. Amara's rise from a tough Brooklyn neighborhood, her speaking tours, her philanthropy work. With each word, Ebele's jaw clenched tighter. "Mom," Jaden's face lit up as he spotted her. "Come meet Amara Diallo." Ebele painted on her society smile, the one she'd perfected over decades of hospital fundraisers. "What a pleasure!" Her handshake lasted a fraction too long, her nails pressing slightly into Amara's skin. "Your son is too modest about his achievements," Amara said, either missing or choosing to ignore the subtle aggression. "The video of him singing to that little girl before her surgery went viral for good reason." "Jaden has always been special." Ebele's voice carried an edge. "I've made sure of that." The evening progressed like a chess match. Whenever Jaden and Amara drifted together, Ebele materialized with introductions to hospital board members or reminiscences about Jaden's childhood. But she couldn't stop their gravitational pull. Near midnight, as the crowd thinned, Ebele watched them exchange phone numbers. Her son's smile sparked something dark inside her chest. In her Manhattan penthouse later that night, she made a call. "Mr. Thompson, I need your most thorough background check. Money's no object." She pulled up Amara's social media profile on her laptop. "Start with her business dealings, then dig deeper. Everyone has secrets. Find hers." The city lights cast shadows across Ebele's face as she scrolled through photos of the woman who dared to threaten her carefully constructed world. "No one will ever be good enough for my son," she whispered to the empty room. No one. Le Bernardin's private dining room sparkled with celebration 6 months later. Amara's 3-carat ring caught the candlelight as she showed her cousin the princess-cut diamond. Jaden had proposed that morning in Central Park, flash mob dancers emerging from behind trees as he dropped to one knee. Ebele sat at the head table, her dark burgundy dress absorbing the warm light. Her phone glowed beneath the white tablecloth as she scrolled through the files Mr. Thompson had sent. 3 months of surveillance had revealed nothing but success and charity work, until now. "Speech!" Marcus raised his glass, grinning at the couple. "Tell us how you knew she was the one, Jay." Jaden stood, his hand finding Amara's shoulder. "From that first night at the gala, I couldn't get her out of my mind. Her strength, her grace, the way she lights up every room." Ebele's phone buzzed. A new email from Thompson. "Check attachment immediately." Her finger trembled as she opened the file. And when she organized that surprise birthday party for the kids in my ward, Jaden continued, I knew I'd found my soulmate. The attachment loaded. Emily's eyes widened. Her wineglass froze halfway to her lips. To my beautiful bride-to-be, Jaden raised his champagne flute. You've made me the happiest man alive. Emily excused herself, heels clicking against marble as she rushed to the restaurant's powder room. Inside a silk wallpapered stall, she dialed Thompson's number. You're sure about this? She hissed. Authenticated this afternoon, his voice crackled through the speaker. Old accounts, different name. She buried it deep. Send everything to my secure email. Emily's reflection showed a smile that never reached her eyes. You've done well. She returned to find Amara showing her future sisters-in-law wedding venue photos on her phone. The girl's perfectly curated image made Emily's blood boil. Such a careful construction of lies. February at St. Patrick's Cathedral, Amara beamed. We've already booked it. How wonderful! Emily's voice dripped honey-coated venom. She raised her glass. To new beginnings? Later, as cars lined up outside the restaurant, Ebeli caught her son's arm. Jaden, darling, are you sure about this? Marriage is such a serious step. Mom, please. He kissed her cheek. I've never been more certain. Ebeli watched Jaden help Amara into their waiting car, her phone heavy in her clutch with its dark secrets. We'll see about that, she murmured, reaching for her own phone. We'll see. The city's night sky swallowed her words as she typed, Need meeting tomorrow. Bring everything you have on Amara Diallo. Every detail matters now. February frost painted St. Patrick's Cathedral windows on the morning everything changed. Dawn had barely broken when Ebile Okoro slipped through the side entrance, her black designer dress blending with the shadows. The wedding coordinator's heels echoed somewhere in the distance as Ebele made her way to the cathedral kitchen. Rows of silver service gleamed on starched white tablecloths. Her fingers trailed across serving pieces until they found the cake knife, its blade catching early morning light. She tested its weight, then tucked it into her leather clutch. Across town, in the bridal suite of the Plaza Hotel, Amara sat before a gilded mirror. Her makeup artist worked in silence, while her mother draped her grandmother's pearls around her neck. You're sure about this? Her mother whispered. Something about his mother. Mom, stop. Amara touched the pearls. Ebele just needs time to adjust. But even as she spoke, her phone buzzed with another anonymous text. He deserves better than your lies. Meanwhile, Jaden straightened his bow tie in the cathedral's groom's room, his best man Marcus watching with concern. Your mother's been acting strange, Marcus said. Those comments at the rehearsal dinner. She's just protective. Jaden adjusted his cufflinks, his father's, before he'd abandoned them 29 years ago. Everything will settle after today. The cathedral's ancient wooden doors groaned open as early guests arrived. Ebele watched from the shadows as ushers guided them to their seats. Her clutch felt heavy against her side, its contents her secret weapon. Jaden. She found her son alone in the church garden. Morning sun cast strange shadows across his face. There's still time to stop this. Mom, please, not today. You don't know who she really is. Ebele gripped his arm. What she's hidden from you. I know everything I need to know. He pulled away gently. No. Ebele's voice dropped to a whisper. You don't. Back in the bridal suite, Amara's phone buzzed one final time. She checked it while her bridesmaids fussed with her veil. Your past catches up today. Her hands trembled as she deleted the message. Outside her window, snow began to fall on Fifth Avenue, white flakes dancing like scattered dreams. The cathedral bells tolled 10. Ebli took her place in the front pew, clutch positioned carefully beside her. The organist began warming up, notes echoing off ancient stone. She watched her son take his place at the altar, so handsome, so naive. You'll thank me one day, she whispered to herself, fingers brushing her clutch. A mother knows best. The winter sun streamed through stained glass, painting colors across the marble floor where soon everything would change. In the bride's room, Amara took a deep breath and lifted her veil. In the kitchen, a silver cake knife left an empty space on pristine white linen. And in the front pew, Ebele Okoro waited, ready to protect her son from a threat only she could see. Cannon in D floated through St. Patrick's as white roses perfumed the air. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting halos on the guests who stood for the bride's entrance. Jaden rocked slightly on his feet at the altar, his smile bright with anticipation. But Ebeli's front row seat sat empty. The massive doors swung open. Amara appeared in silhouette, a vision in white silk. Her father tucked her hand into his elbow as the first step echoed through sacred space. 200 guests held their breath at her beauty. No one noticed the shadow moving behind the columns. 3 steps down the aisle. 4. 5. Amara's smile radiated pure joy as she caught Jaden's eye. The violin's melody soared higher. Movement flickered in Jaden's peripheral vision. His mother emerged from behind a column, her black dress rippling like spilled ink. Something silver glinted in her hand. The music stuttered. A bridesmaid gasped. "You can't have him!" Ebeli's voice shattered the sacred silence. She moved with terrible purpose, the cake knife raised high. Time stretched like pulled taffy. Jaden's foot left the altar step. His hand reached out. His voice formed the word, "Mom." Too late. The knife plunged into white silk. Amara's bouquet hit marble with a soft thud. Red bloomed across pure white like spreading watercolor. "Mine," Ebeli whispered, striking again. "He's always been mine." Chaos erupted. Screams bounced off ancient stone. Guests scrambled toward exits. The string quartet's music collapsed into discord. Through it all, Ebele kept striking, her face serene as she destroyed her son's happiness. Each thrust accompanied by soft words, "My boy, my baby, my son." The wedding coordinator's fingers trembled, dialing 911. The photographer's camera clicked rapidly, capturing horror in high definition. But Jaden saw only his mother's eyes, calm, certain, filled with twisted love as she knelt beside his dying bride. "I saved you," she whispered, stroking Amara's cheek with bloody fingers. "A mother always knows best." Marcus tackled her too late. The knife skittered across marble, leaving crimson trails like macabre art. 2 ushers pinned Ebeli's arms as she smiled up at her son. "She would have ruined everything," she said softly. "Now you'll stay with me forever." Jaden cradled Amara's body, his tuxedo soaking up her blood. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear over the chaos. Her hand clutched weakly at his sleeve, then fell. Outside, sirens wailed closer. February sun painted the cathedral steps with light that seemed obscene in its beauty. And inside, a mother's twisted love had turned a wedding day into a nightmare that would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. As police officers burst through the doors, Ebeli began humming a lullaby, the same one she'd sung to baby Jaden nearly 3 decades ago. Her voice echoed off stone walls, still reverberating with screams, a gentle counterpoint to the horror she'd created. "Everything I did," she said as handcuffs clicked around her wrists, "I did for love." Detective Kiana Wright stepped through scattered rose petals, her notepad open as cameras flashed behind her. The cathedral's marble still held dark stains despite crime scene technicians' efforts. A single white satin heel lay abandoned near the altar. "Tell me what you saw," she said to the wedding photographer, whose hands shook as he scrolled through images on his camera display. "She moved like a dancer," he said, his voice hollow. "Each strike precise. And her face, I've never seen someone look so peaceful while—" His voice trailed off as he reached a particular photo. At Bellevue Hospital, Jaden sat in a private waiting room, his blood-stained tuxedo jacket discarded beside him. Marcus pressed a cup of untouched coffee into his hands. "The surgeons are doing everything possible," Marcus said. Jaden stared at his red-stained cuffs. "She hummed my lullaby," he whispered, while she hummed my lullaby. Across town at the precinct, Ebele sat serenely in an interrogation room, still wearing her black dress. Blood had dried on her manicured hands, but she hadn't asked to wash them. "Mrs. Okoro," Detective Wright leaned forward, "you understand your rights." "I understand everything," Ebele smiled. "I understand that mothers must protect their children, even from themselves." The detective slid crime scene photos across the table. Ebele pushed them back without looking. "Did you plan this attack?" "Plan?" Ebele laughed softly. "Does a mother plan to catch her toddler before he falls? Does she plan to kiss a scraped knee? Love needs no plan." Outside the interrogation room, 2 officers watched through one-way glass. "Her lawyer's trying for an insanity defense," one muttered. "Nothing insane about those wounds," the other replied. "Calculated, strategic." Back at the hospital, a surgeon in blood-spattered scrubs approached Jaden. The words "massive blood loss" and "did everything possible" floated past him like debris in a storm. Marcus caught him as his legs gave out. A nurse found Amara's phone in her discarded bridal clutch. The screen lit up with one last unsent message to Jaden. "I've never been happier than I am today." Detective Wright ended her interview with Ebele as sunset painted the interrogation room walls gold. "One last question," she said. "Do you regret your actions?" Ebele tilted her head, considering. "Do you regret breathing, eating, protecting your heart as it beats?" She leaned forward, her eyes clear and focused. "My son is safe now. How could I regret that?" As night fell over Manhattan, 3 scenes played out in parallel. Jaden collapsed in a hospital chapel, Marcus standing guard outside the door. Detective Wright pinned crime scene photos to her board, connecting red strings between evidence markers. And in a holding cell, Ebele Okoro sat cross-legged on her cot, humming that same lullaby, her bloody hands folded neatly in her lap. The next morning's headlines would scream, "Wedding Day Murder," but none would capture the true horror. A mother's love turned poison, a son's trust shattered, and a bride's final smile frozen in time by the flash of a camera she'd hired to capture joy. Summer heat pressed against the courthouse windows as Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen approached the jury. Her heels clicked on polished floors while she held up a stack of printed emails. "Months of surveillance," she said, her voice filling the hushed courtroom. "Hundreds of threatening messages sent from cyber cafes across Manhattan, Mrs. Okoro tracked every moment of Amara Diallo's life, searching for weakness. Ebeli sat at the defense table, perfectly poised in a navy suit, her gray-streaked hair tied back severely. She watched the prosecutor with the same serene smile she'd worn in the cathedral. "The defense claims temporary insanity," Chen continued, "but consider this." She held up the silver cake knife in its evidence bag. Mrs. Okoro asked the caterer 3 times to confirm this knife would be present. She requested its exact location. She studied the kitchen layout. These are not the actions of someone who snapped. These are the calculations of a predator. In the gallery, Jaden stared at his mother's back. He hadn't spoken to her since that day. Marcus sat beside him, a steady presence as Chen called her first witness. The private investigator will now confirm that Mrs. Okoro paid him $50,000 to dig into Ms. Diallo's past. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. She wanted everything: bank records, old addresses, former relationships. When I couldn't find anything damaging, she became intense, started talking about protecting her son from hidden threats. The defense attorney, Miranda Powell, rose for cross-examination. "Would you say my client seemed obsessed with her son's safety?" "Objection," Chen called. "Leading the witness." "I'll rephrase." Powell smoothed her jacket. "How would you characterize Mrs. Okoro's concerns?" Thompson shifted. "She believed Ms. Diallo would destroy her son's life, said a mother's duty never ends." As testimony continued, Ebeli pulled a small notebook from her designer bag, writing in precise strokes. A bailiff glanced over. She was drawing wedding cakes, each topped with a carefully detailed knife. The prosecution's case, built methodically. The wedding coordinator testified about Ebeli's multiple visits to the cathedral kitchen. The photographer's images showed her calculated approach behind the columns. Text messages revealed months of psychological warfare against Amara. Then came the moment the gallery had waited for. The clerk called, "The state calls Dr. Jaden Okoro." Ebeli's pen stopped moving. Her smile faltered for the first time as her son walked to the witness stand, his face a mask of controlled pain. "Dr. Okoro," Chen said gently, "please tell the court about your mother's behavior leading up to your wedding day." Jaden's voice stayed steady. "She called every night, asked about Amara's past, warned me about women who prey on successful men. When I proposed, she said—" He swallowed hard. "She said she'd rather see me dead than married to someone unworthy." "And the morning of the wedding?" "She hugged me in the garden, told me I'd understand soon, that a mother's love conquers all." His hands gripped the witness stand. "I didn't know she meant—" For the first time, Ebeli spoke, her voice carrying across the courtroom. "Everything I said was true, my darling boy." The judge banged his gavel. "Mrs. Okoro, you will remain silent." But Jaden had already broken. Tears ran down his face as years of manipulation crystallized into one terrible truth. "You never loved me," he said to his mother. "You only loved controlling me." Ebeli's mask cracked. She half rose, reaching toward her son. "No, baby. Everything was for you, only for you." The jury needed only 6 hours to reach their verdict. As the foreman stood, Ebeli adjusted her collar, smiled at her son's empty chair. Jaden had refused to return after his testimony. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty." Judge Morris peered over his glasses at Ebeli. "Before sentencing, would you like to address the court?" She rose gracefully, hands clasped. "Every child born comes with an unwritten promise. We mothers vow to protect them, even from themselves. My son needed protection. You call it murder. I call it love. Mrs. Okoro, the judge's voice hardened. Your actions show not love, but obsession. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. 5 years passed. Ebeli's hair turned fully grey in Bedford Hills Correctional. She kept to herself, spending hours in the prison garden, humming lullabies to the plants. Officer Regina Mills watched her through the yard fence. Never seen anyone so calm, she told her partner. Makes my skin crawl. She gets letters, her partner replied. Sends them back unopened. Inside her cell, Ebeli had created a shrine of newspaper clippings. Not of the murder, of Jaden's medical career before that day. His graduation, his first surgery, the viral video of him singing to pediatric patients. She traced his face each night before lights out. Meanwhile, Jaden built a new life in Seattle. He changed hospitals, changed his name. But some nights, he still woke hearing that lullaby, seeing white silk turn red. His therapist suggested writing to his mother. The letters stayed unsent in his desk drawer. Tell me about your mother, Dr. Parker asked during their weekly sessions. Which one? Jaden's laugh held no humor. The one who read me stories and kissed my bruises? Or the one who murdered my fiancée to keep me for herself? He'd tried dating again. Each relationship ended when they asked about family. How do you explain that your mother's love was a poison that killed the woman you planned to marry? Back at Bedford Hills, Ebeli received a new cellmate. Young, scared, in for drug possession. That night, she heard the girl crying. Hush now, Ebeli whispered in the darkness. A mother knows best. The girl requested a transfer the next morning. Officer Mills found Ebeli in the garden again, tending roses with careful hands. The same hands that had gripped the knife. Ever regret it? She asked impulsively. Ebeli looked up, eyes clear and focused. Do you regret breathing? My son was my breath, my blood, my purpose. I gave him life twice, once at birth, once at that altar. You destroyed his life. No. Ebeli smiled her serene smile. I saved him. He just doesn't understand yet. But he will. A mother's love is patient. That night, as storms rolled over the prison, Ebeli sat cross-legged on her bed. She held a worn photo of 3-year-old Jaden, school bag too big on his small shoulders, her hand holding his. My sweet boy, she whispered to the empty cell. One day you'll come back to me. You'll understand that everything was love. Lightning flashed, illuminating the wall of clippings, the shrine to a relationship forever shattered by a mother's twisted devotion. In Seattle, Jaden jolted awake from another nightmare, his sheets soaked with sweat. And somewhere between them, the ghost of Amara's wedding day smile haunted the darkness, a reminder that sometimes love's greatest threat comes wrapped in a mother's embrace. 10 years after the Cathedral Massacre, tour guide Nina Baptiste led another group through St. Patrick's. The marble was replaced, she said, indicating the floor near the altar. But some say when it rains... A teenage girl raised her hand. Is it true about the bloodstains coming back? Nina never finished that story anymore. Not since she'd seen actual crimson droplets appearing on stormy days, defying logical explanation. At Bedford Hills, Ebeli's hair had turned snow white, but her posture remained regal as she knitted in the common room. Baby blankets. Always baby blankets. Sky blue wool for the grandson she'd never meet. Your son called, Officer Mills lied kindly, like she did every Sunday. No, Emily's needles clicked steadily. He doesn't need to call. I feel him thinking of me. In Seattle, Jaden stood before his bathroom mirror, touching new gray strands at his temples. His wife Sarah watched from the doorway, 6 months pregnant with their first child. They never discussed his past, but she'd seen the cathedral photos he kept locked in his desk. "Have you decided?" she asked softly. "About the name?" He hadn't told her about the letters from Bedford Hills arriving every month now, returned unopened. About his mother's practiced handwriting on each envelope. "For my grandchild." "If it's a boy," he said, "James. Not Jaden Jr. Never that." The cathedral hosted another wedding that spring. During the ceremony, an elderly priest blessed the couple, trying to forget another blessing cut short by violence. He'd switched to performing only baptisms after that day, until this bride convinced him love still deserved sacred witness. In her cell, Ebeli arranged her shrine with precision. News clippings tracked her son's Seattle career through medical journal citations and hospital newsletters. A new article mentioned his upcoming child. "A grandmother," she whispered to the empty room. "I'll have a new chance to love correctly." Officer Mills found her writing in the garden, surrounded by roses she'd cultivated from cuttings. A letter lay unsealed on the bench. "My darling grandchild, some call love a blessing, others a curse, but a mother's love, true love, transcends such simple judgment. Ask your father about the lullaby. He'll remember." Mills touched her radio, suddenly uneasy. That night, as autumn winds rattled the prison windows, Ebeli folded the letter with careful hands, the same hands that had once wielded a silver knife, the same hands that had shaped her son's entire world until it shattered. "Love conquers all," she told her reflection in the dark window. "Even time, even distance, even truth." In Seattle, Jaden dreamed of white silk and silver blades, of his mother's gentle smile as she destroyed his world. He woke to find Sarah watching him, protective hands curved around their unborn child. "I won't let it happen again," he whispered. But in Bedford Hills, Ebeli rocked in her cell, humming that familiar lullaby. Her shrine glowed in the moonlight, 1,000 moments of possession disguised as devotion. And somewhere between mother and son, between love and obsession, between past and future, an unanswered question echoed. Can any love survive the shadow of a mother's twisted heart? The cathedral bells tolled midnight, their sound carrying across Manhattan like a warning. Or perhaps a reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the hands meant to protect us, and the sweetest lullabies can hide the darkest dreams. In her cell, Ebele smiled at the moon and kept knitting, patient as always, certain that love, her kind of love, would find its way home again.